Hey developers, welcome back to the programming fields. In our last video, we implemented Laravel Passport for secure API authentication with a deep dive into the OAuth versus OAuth 2, and also we saw the differences between Sanctum and Passport. But what's next? In this video, we are going beyond login and authentication. We will build a full-featured REST API for a to-do application, and this will be a complete with CRUD operations, secure API endpoints, and a scalable architecture using the repository and service layer pattern. We won't just code, we will structure everything professionally so that your API is maintainable and ready for real-world applications. So in the today's video, you will learn how to create, update, delete and fetch to-dos using API requests, and we will see how to properly structure an API using the repository and service layers. Also, we will see how to protect routes with Laravel Passport authentication, and then we will see best practices for handling API responses efficiently. So by the end of this video, you won't just understand Laravel API development, you will have a complete production ready API that you can integrate with a front-end, mobile application or even third-party services. So in the previous video, we created a REST API for user authentication in which we covered user registration, user login, fetching profile data, and we created this user logout API. And if I'll quickly jump to the code editor, here we have the Laravel 11 application setup with the Passport installation. Inside app, HTTP, inside controllers, we have one auth folder. Inside the auth folder, we have this auth controller, and this auth controller is responsible to manage user registration, login, fetching profile details and this logout functionality. And for managing the code structure, we have used service and repository pattern. So inside this auth controller, we injected this auth service for the business logic handling, and this auth service is created inside this services folder. So everything related to data mapping or business logic are written here inside the auth services, and from here I'm just calling the auth repository. Okay, so the auth repository is again responsible to handle the database operations only. And for handling the responses, we have created few constants and helper functions. So firstly, for returning the responses in the JSON, I have created one API response class. Inside that, we have the static functions, and also I have created a few constants inside the base controller itself. So these constants are reusable and we can use these in every API responses. Now we will jump to the next step in which we will set up the model and migration for to-dos. So inside the models, currently we have the user model only. So firstly, I'll create a model and migration for the to-do. So I'll navigate to the terminal, and here I will create model for to-do, and I will specify -m for migration, C for the controller, and I just want to create the resource controller because we will perform the CRUD operations. So I will simply pass R, and this will create the controller with the resource methods. Let's hit enter. Yes, so the model, migration and the resource controller has been created. I'll jump to the code base. Inside the to-do controller, we have the default functions. Okay, so let's come to the migration first. So inside the migration, we have the to-dos migration. Here I will add some fields. Firstly, we will have to add the user ID because every to-do will be linked with the user. So only the authenticated user can create and manage to-dos. Okay, so I will just link foreign ID as user ID, and next I will just define string to-do title. I will set it to nullable. Thereafter I will just add description, and I will set this to text, and as of now I will create only these two fields. Okay, now respective to this migration, we will have to add in the fillable property of the to-do model. So let's add protected fillable. Inside this, user ID, title and description. And here I will define one relation to fetch the user based on the to do. So every to do will belong from one user. So I will define user function here. This will be our belong to relation, user, and this relation type will be belongs to. Inside this user, I will just write return $this belongs to. Inside this function, I will just pass user model class, and then we will have to pass the foreign ID. So the foreign ID is user ID we have, and next we will have to pass the primary ID, that is user ID. Now I will jump to the user model, and here I will define one relation to fetch the to do's. So a single user can have multiple to do's. Okay, so we will have to define has many relationship here. So I will define to do's. Inside this, I will write return $this has many, and I will just add to do class. And next we will have to add the foreign ID. So in the to do model, we have the foreign ID as user ID and ID in the user model. Okay, and this will be type has many. This is done. Let me close these two files, and I'll come to the terminal again. I will run the migration using PHP artisan migrate command. So the migration has been executed. I will check out the database. Here we have the to do's table. Now we will start creating the functionality to create and manage to do's. So I'll jump to the to do controller, and here for organizing the code, again I will create a service class for the to do and also a repository class. So again I'll jump to the terminal, and I will create one class using make class command, and this will be added inside the services folder because we already have the services folder. So this will create a to do service inside that services directory. So I will specify the service name as to do service. Yes, the to do service class has been created. And next I will create repository class. So I will specify the folder name as repository, and I will specify the class name as to do repository. Let's hit enter. Yes, the to do repository class has been created inside repository folder. So inside the services, we have the to do service created, and inside the repository, we have the to do repository. Let's start with the to do controller now. So in the index, we have to fetch all the to do's belonging to the logged in user only. That means every to do's will be linked with one user, and who is logged in, we will fetch only those to do's to that logged in user. So this will happen based on the given token. So here firstly I'll create one constructor, public function construct. Inside this I will inject the to do service class, and I will create one instance as to do service. And in order to use this to do service in further functions, we will have to assign this to a different variable. So I will create a protected to do service variable, and I will assign this to do service to the protected to do service variable, just like this. Now based on this to do service, I will call the function to fetch to do's. So here I'll just add $this to do service get to do's, and we will have to define this function inside the service class. So I will define public function get to do's. So this function will fetch all the to do's. To fetch to do's based on logged in user. So inside this function, Again, it won't be responsible to operate with the database. We will have to inject the to-do repository class. So inside the constructor, I will inject to-do repository and I will create its instance as to-do repository. Now again, let's define a protected variable here, and I will assign this repository instance to this protected variable, just like this. Now based on this repository instance, I will call a function from the repository class. So I will just call get to-do, and I will define this get to-do function inside the repository class. So here I will define get to-do function, and this will fetch all the to-dos belonging to the logged in user only. So firstly, I will just import to-do model : all function. So currently this will fetch all the to-dos, but we have to fetch to-dos based on the logged in user only. So what we will have to do, we will have to pass the user ID here. Okay. So firstly, I will just add where condition where we have the user ID, and this I will fetch it from the parameter as user ID here, and simply I'll pass it here, and I will use paginate function. Inside this paginate, I will just pass the pagination as 10, and I will simply return this. Okay, this is get to do function, and this is accepting parameter as integer user ID, and this will return to do's. Now let's come to the to do service, and from here we will have to pass one parameter as user ID. So for getting the authenticated user data, better we can create one function inside auth service itself, because we have already imported the auth facade here. So in the to do service, we don't have to import it again for the code redundancy. So better I can create one function here, function get auth user. Okay, inside this I will define this function as get auth user, and here this will simply return auth user data, just like this. Now I will copy this function, I'll come to the to do service, and in the to do service I will inject that auth service again, and I will create its instance as auth service. Okay, let's define one more protected variable here as auth service, and let's assign this to a variable. Auth service is equals to auth service. Now based on this auth service instance, I will call that function. So we have auth service and get auth user, just like this. That's all. And here I'll just capture $auth user. Okay. Now we can pass the auth user ID here in order to fetch the to-dos. Okay. And we will have to simply return back to this controller. Here this is get auth user data, and here we are fetching to-dos based on auth user ID. Now let's come to the controller, and here we will wrap this in a try catch block first. Okay, and for returning the success or error response, we already created a common class, and that we have used inside auth controller. So I'll simply copy these two lines, and I'll come to the to do controller inside the try block, and we will have to move this line at the top inside the try block, and here I will just capture the response as a to do, because we will get the to do in the form of array of objects. And here we don't need this if condition, and let's import the API response class here. For the data, we will have to pass the to-dos. Okay, this is done. And for the exception, we will have to add another API response here, just like this. So I'll paste it here. Let's import the log facade. Okay, and let's change the message as exception occurred while fetching to-dos. This is done. So this function is completed. Now we will work on the save to-do function. So for saving the to-dos, we have the store function here. So again, I will just wrap this in a try catch block first, and I'll copy these two lines from here again. Let me dock this window, and this will be while saving to do. And for saving the to do, again I will call the to do service. So I'll copy this, I will add it here, and firstly we will have to validate the to do form request. So for that we will create another form request as to do form request, and that we will inject here. So for saving the to do, I will just call store to do function. Inside this I will pass the to do request, and firstly let's create to do request here. I'll come to the terminal and I will create one form request, make request as to do request. Okay, the to do request has been created. So let's define the basic validation rules inside the to do request. Okay, and firstly we will have to authorize it. Inside the rules, I will add title as required, and this will be string. Minimum it should be 3. Next I will add description, and this will be required again. String min as 5. And for returning the validation error response, again I will just override the Laravel built-in function. So we have already added inside the auth register. So simply I'll copy it from here, and I will add it inside to do request class. And let's import the validator using this eliminate contract validation and this HTTP response exception. Yes, this is done. Now let's come to the to do controller, and here instead of this eliminate HTTP request, I will just inject the to do request. So this is accepting app HTTP request to do request, and we have its instance, and this is returning eliminate HTTP JSON response. Alright, now inside the to do service we will have to create this function. So we'll come to the to do service again, and here after this function I will define this as store to do. Inside this we will have the to do data, so I will just capture it in a to do request variable, and from here I will just trigger the repository for saving the to do. So I'll copy this instance, and inside the repository class I will define one more function as store to do, and I will just pass this to do request. Let's copy this function. Let's navigate to the to do repository class, and here I will define this function store to do public function store to do. This will capture the to do request, and here we will call the to do model create function. Inside this we will pass the to do request, and again I will return back this to service. So this is accepting param as to do request, and this will return object as to do. This is done. Let's navigate to the to do service, and let's return this to controller back. This is parameter array as to do request, and inside the to do controller we will have to capture this response in a variable just like to do, and I will check if we have to do created, then I will return this success response. Okay, and inside the data I will just return that to do, and this status code will be 201. So I will define that in the base controller itself. Okay, so after success I will just add one more constant as created. This will be 201, and here inside the to do controller, after saving the to do, I will just call that created constant, and if to do is not created, then we will return the error response. So that we have already added inside the auth controller. So I will simply copy it from here, this error response, and I will paste it for the else part. Okay, this is failed message. This is done. Now let's check the store and this index API. So I'll come to the api.php route, and inside this auth middleware itself, we will have to create one route for the to do. So better we will define outside this auth controller. So I will just define route controller to do controller colon class, or better we can just define resource route here, and here I will specify the endpoint just like to do's, and here I'll just add this auth middleware. This is done, and this is for managing to do's CRUD operations. Now if we'll come to the terminal and if we'll check out the route list, yes, we have the routes added for the to do's. Now in the next step, we will test the to do creation functionality. So I'll be navigating to the Postman tool, and here in the new tab, I will access that API endpoint. So simply I'll copy this endpoint here, I will paste it, and after auth, I will just try to access that route endpoint. And for creating the to do's, we have the API endpoint as API/to-dos, and this will be post method. Okay. Similarly, for getting the list of to do's, we have the endpoint as API/to-dos, but this should be get request. So firstly, let's test the get request for fetching the list of to do's. Currently, we don't have any to do's created yet. So initially, this will return empty array. So let's come to the Postman again, and here I will simply add API/to-dos. I'm going to make get request. If I will try to hit enter, this said route login not defined. So here in the headers, I will add accept application/JSON again. Let's resend this request. Yes, this said unauthenticated. So again we will have to pass the auth bearer token here, and for this we will have to generate the access token. So I'll come to the login API. Here we have the login credentials. I will make the API request. Yes, this has generated the access token here. I'll simply copy this access token. I will navigate to the get to do's API endpoint. In the auth, we will select bearer token, and in the token, I will paste that newly generated token. Now I will again send this request. Yes, we got this success response here, but in the data, currently we don't have any data here, and here we are getting the data in the paginated form. Okay, by default, this is empty array now. So firstly we will have to create a list of to do's here. So I will simply copy this endpoint. I'll navigate to the new tab. I will change this request type to post, and in the header again I will add accept application/JSON, and for making this post request again we will need auth token. So again I will choose bearer token. Now if we try to send the post request here, we will receive the validation error messages. Okay, so let's add title and description for this to do. So I'll come to the body. Inside form data, I will add title, and I will set the to do title REST API using passport auth. Now I will add description. Okay, let's try to click on send, and here we got some error. This is pointing to create function. Okay, so while inserting the to do, we have passed the to do request. Let's fix that. This is to do controller. Here we have the store function, and inside this we have captured the to do request, and this to do request object is passed in the store to do function. So let's navigate to the to do service. Here we have the store to do, and we have captured the to do request. So in the store to do function, we have passed the to do request object directly. So before saving this to do, we will have to prepare the to do request data. So if I'll come to the to do migration, we have the field as user ID, title and description. But while creating the to do, in the postman request, we have passed only title and description. So we will have to capture the authenticated user ID based on the given bearer token. So inside the to do service, here we will have to prepare the to do request data based on our migration. So I will append the user ID in this to do request. So I will create one more function, prepare to do request. Okay, and currently this is to do request object. So I will convert this to array, and I will extract the form request input data. So I will simply add to do request all function, and I will capture this to a variable as to do request. Now inside the to do request array, I will append one more field as user ID, and this will be auth user ID. So for getting the auth user ID, we already created one common function just like this. So I will simply copy this and I will add it here, and I will get the auth user ID from this auth user just like this. Okay, and here I will return to do request just like this. All right, I will give one annotation here, function prepare to do request. This is capturing the parameter as object to do request, and this is returning array of to do request. That's all. Now I will call this function inside the store to do function, and in the function argument I will pass the to do request, and let's assign this to a variable as to do request. Okay, and I will add dump and die to do request. Let's navigate to the postman again. Let's click on send. Yes, we are getting title, description and user ID. Now simply we can pass this to do request in the repository class in order to create the to do. That's all. Let's try to send this request again. Yes, we received the success and this to do has been created. Now if we come to the get to do request, this is our get to do's API endpoint, and if we will try to send this request, yes, we got the to do here. So the get to do's and store to do functionality has been done. Now in the next step, we will be working on to fetch single to do. So we will create one more function inside the to do controller. For this show to do, we already have the route model binding added. So inside this show function, again I will create one more function, and that will be pointing to the to do service. So simply I will copy this to do service, and I will just add show to do. Inside this, I will pass this to do instance. I will copy this function. I will navigate to the to do service, and here I will define that function as show to do. Inside this, we will have to capture the to do object. Okay, and I will add dump and die to do. But while fetching the to do, we will have to fetch the authenticated user to do. That means if I have created a to do, then I can fetch my own to do's only. I cannot get the other users created to do. Similarly, for getting the list of to-dos, we have fetched it using the auth user. So in the same order, for getting the single to-do, again we will have to check it using the authenticated user. So I'll copy this auth user function and here I will add it, and from this function I will make another function call for the to-do repository. Inside this I will define one more function to get this single to-do, get to-do, and in the function argument we will have to capture that to-do model instance, and we will have to return it by checking the auth user condition. So here I will receive one more parameter as user ID, and I will check it using that where user ID is user ID. Okay, I'll come to the service now, and here I'll call that function get to do. Now we don't have to define any route here because in the api.php route we have added resource route. So I'll come to the Postman again. I will copy this API endpoint. I will make another API request, and this will be to-dos/id. Okay. In the route list, for getting the single to-do, we have the endpoint as API/to-dos and /to-do object. So instead of object, we will pass the to-do ID just like this. So we have the to-do ID as 1 that we have created in the last step, and again we will have to pass the bearer token inside the auth. Now if we try to send the API request, in the preview we got the to-do data. Now let's proceed for the next functionality. So in the to-do service, I will remove this dump and die, and here I will call the to-do repository class. So I'll copy this instance, I will paste it here, and I will call that to-do repository get to-do function, and this function accepts two parameters. So we will have to pass the parameter just like to-do and auth user ID. Okay, this is done, and let's return this to the controller. Now in the controller we will have to capture that to do, and I will add dump and die to do. Let's come to the Postman again, and let's try to send this request. Okay, we are getting the eliminate builder. So better I'll use the first function here because we have used where condition. Now if we'll try to send this request again, yes, we got the single to do object here. Now let's return this response in the JSON. So in the to do controller, I will return the API response using this success and error. So I'll paste it here. Here this will check if to do has been created, then this will return the success status. This status code will be success. This is done. For the else part, if you are unable to fetch the to do, I will copy this error response. I will paste it here. This is done. Now let's come to the Postman again. Let's try to send another API request. Yes, we got the success response here. Now if we'll try to change the to do ID, and again if we'll try to send the request, this said not found. That means that to do does not exist. So this is done. Now in the next step, we will be working on the update to do functionality. So I will create one more function. So inside the update function, this has already captured the request object and the to do model instance using the route model binding. So from this update function, again I will call the to do service. So I will copy this, I will paste it here, and I will call update to do function, and here let's add try and catch to make this to consistent. Okay, and let's move these entire lines in the try block, and in the catch block I will add these 2 lines here, and I will change this message as exception occurred while fetching the to do. This is done. Now in the update function, again I will call this try catch block, and this line will be moved inside try block. Now inside the update to do, we will have to pass these parameters just like to do request object, but instead of this eliminate HTTP request, again I will call the to do request. So we already have this to do request here. I will copy this. I will change this as to do request. Now in the second argument, I will pass this to do model instance. Now I will copy this function. I will navigate to the to do service, and here I will define this function as update to do, and we will define this function. Now let's capture this function parameter. So in the first parameter we are getting the to do request, and next we will capture the to do model instance. Now before updating the to do, we will have to make sure we are updating only those to do which is created by the authenticated user. So we will have to check auth user again. So better I can just call this show to do function inside this update to do, because firstly we will have to find the to do based on the ID and authenticated user ID. So for making the reusable, I'll call this show to do function inside the update, and here I will just pass the to do instance, this one, okay, and this will return the to do. So I will capture to do data, find to do based on to do ID and auth user. Now I will check if to do is there, then I will update to do title, and this title will come from this to do request title, just like this, and we will have to add it for the description, and I will use the model eloquent save function, just like this. We don't have to update the authenticated user ID, and I will return this back to the controller. This is done. In the parameter we are capturing to do request, and we have the model instance as to do, and this is returning to do. This is done. Now let's come to the controller again. Let's capture this response. If to do is updated, then again I will return this response in the JSON format. So I'll copy this, I will paste it here, okay. If to do is there, then this will return the success response, and for the exception, again I will copy these 2 lines, and this message will be exception occurred while updating the to do. This is done. Now let's come to the postman again, and let's test that update functionality. So I'll make another API request. I will copy this endpoint. I will come to the terminal first, and for the update we have the put or patch method, and this is our API endpoint as API/todos. So let's change this method to put. Now in the auth, again we will have to choose the bearer token, and in the body we will have to pass the data as well. So firstly, if we will try to send the request without passing the form request, this should throw the validation error, as we defined the validation rules for the to do request. So firstly it said not found. This to do ID does not exist. So we have the to do ID as 1 because we have created only one to do, and that ID is 1. So based on this, if I will try to send the request, this returned validation failed because we have not passed the title and description for updating the to do. So we will have to pass the title and description in the params, and here in the key pair we will pass the title as to do list updated. Okay, and this will be description REST API to do list is updated. Now if we'll resend this API request, this said request processed successfully, that means to do has been updated, but this returned boolean only. So this is done. Now if we'll try to get this to do based on the ID 1, yes, we can see that to do title and description have been updated. So we have successfully implemented to do get, to do store, to do fetch and update functionality. Now in the next step, we will implement the to do delete functionality. So I'll navigate to the code editor and here I'll implement this destroy to do function. So firstly I'll create try catch block here. Inside this, again I will call the to do service and I will call delete to do function. Inside the delete to do function, again we need to do instance. This is delete to do and I'll copy this function name. I will come to the to do service and here I will define this function delete to do. This is to do public function delete to do and let's capture this to do, and again we will have to check if the processing to do is created by the authenticated user. That means this to do which is going to be deleted is created by the same user, then we will delete that to do only. So again we will have to find the to do based on the authenticated user. So I'll copy this so to do function, I will paste it here and I will use if we have the to do, then this will delete that to do only and I will return this. So this is done. I'll come to the controller again and here I will capture the API response. So simply I'll copy these 3 lines, I will paste it here and here we don't have to return the data. So I'll remove this and for the catch exception I will copy these 2 lines, I will paste it here. I will change the message as exception occurred while deleting the to do. This is done. Now let's come to the terminal and for deleting the to do we have this API endpoint as API/todos and we will have to pass the to do instance and this will accept the method as delete. So let's come to the postman again. Let's copy this endpoint. Let's make another API request for delete to do. I will change the method as delete. In the auth, again we will have to choose bearer token. We don't have to pass any parameter in the body, only we need the to do ID. Let's try to send the API request. Yes, this said request processed successfully. Here we can change the message. So inside the common API response, I will define one more constant as public const deleted success and this will be deleted successfully and one more for deleted field. This will be unable to delete. Please try again. Okay, this is done. Now I will copy this constant and I will add it for this to do deleted and here I will append a message as to do, because from this controller this will just append the message as deleted successfully. So I have not created this constant specific for the to do. This can be for multi-purpose. That's why I have added to do here and for the failed message I will change this to deleted failed. This is done. I'll come to the postman tool again. Now if I'll try to send this request, this will throw 404 because this to do has been already deleted. Yes. So we will have to create one more to do. So I will trigger this post endpoint. Yes, the to do has been created again. If you try to fetch it, yes, this to do ID is 2. So in order to get the to do ID 2, we will have to change this ID to 2. Yes, we are able to fetch the to do based on given ID. And now if we try to delete this to do ID 2, yes, this said to do deleted successfully. So this is done, and that's it. We have successfully built a full to do app API in Laravel. This is fully secured with passport authentication, and we followed best practices, separated our code using the repository and service layer, and we ensured our API is structured, scalable and secure. If you want to connect this API with a front end, just like in the React.js, you can simply drop your comments in the comment section so that I will bring a playlist on the React.js as well. And do you need refresh tokens for long-term authentication? We will also cover that in an upcoming video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.